Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn today. My name is Jeremy. You see me here all the time, but I will be leading our call today. Happy to help and answer any questions we have. I'll give it a couple minutes to see if people start loading in, and then I'll talk about all our usual things, and then we can move forward from there. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A, and I'd be happy to take a look. So post up any questions you've got, and um, otherwise, if you're here just to join and watch, you can do that as well. Okay, so a couple of things just to quickly highlight. Got a couple of things that you can check out if you're curious or interested in anything that we've got going on in Decisions. We've got our YouTube channel, we've got the Decisions Solutions Marketplace, and we've got our events. So if you're curious about any of those things, I can highlight what some of those options are available to us if you are curious. So at marketplace.decisions.com, we've got a lot of great different projects and things that you can just simply download if you're curious or interested in using them, so that you could easily find some pretty neat things, gain some inspiration, or find some really cool things that you can do and build with in Decisions. So definitely check this out. There may be some useful things in there for you. We actually have a couple of videos on a few of these things here and there on our YouTube channel, actually. So if you're curious about that, you can check out our YouTube channel, which is Decisions Training. Here we post a lot of just different videos over different useful topics and things that people kind of ask questions about a lot, or just some topics that we think are interesting, like the version 9.11 flow design refresh. We've got external truth tables up from last week. We also put all of our lunch and learns up there. So if you're curious, check out our Decisions Training YouTube channel. A lot of great things there, and we continue to post new content as much as we can. And then decisions.com/events. If you're curious about other major events coming up in Decisions, this is a great place to look. So if you're curious about some things and stuff like that, you can definitely check these items out. Here, we've got our bi-weekly roadmap reviews. So if you're curious about that, what's coming up in Decisions, check those out. And then we've got a couple other webinars coming up. This one is on Thursday for AI agents at work, and how you can manage AI agents and things. And then there's also a webinar where we're getting a highlight from Foster's. That's next month, July 24th. So if you're curious, decisions.com/events, you can go there to get and learn about any questions and things there in Decisions. All right, with that, we've got a few questions coming in now, so we can take a look at each of these. So we've got quite a bit of different options here, so I will go through them as they came in. So just be patient. I see all of your questions. We will try to get to all of them. Okay, first question we got from Alexander Stewart, and that is, how can I see the current CPU and memory usage in Decisions being used?
Hey, I'm starting to do more stuff with Decisions, and I started using threading, but I want to make sure that I'm not using too many resources. So I just need a good way to see current in-use resources. Essentially like a, task manager.
Yeah. So, I mean, in general, I know you should be able to see some of that just from like using your like task manager to see how much it is working. I don't know for
Oh, I'm
sure
sorry.
about,
You're hosting us. My bad.
yeah, I think a majority of that is I'm not 100% sure the best way to, if there's a way other than just asking support for help on gathering that data, or if there's a different way to capture that um, directly. I'm not as familiar if there's a direct way to do it within Decisions to see that kind of stuff. I think most of that you would need to just reach out to IT or support and have them check that data for you, or at least tell you where you could look. Because unless someone else on the call here knows, I'm not 100% certain. Um, I guess where to look for that if we host you.
Okay, so I need to reach out to support, but so to see if there's a way I
Yeah,
can get like usage and you know, like current, like I guess workload.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things you can look through, like our system, like event viewer stuff, but they show some elements of things like that. Like you can see in the event viewer, there's like system activity and things you can see. This is like a every 30-second snapshot of like how many flows and rules and things and like thread jobs are running at like every 30 seconds. So this might give you some insight. Um, and there's a couple others that may be useful in looking at this, but I think this is like the main one.
How would
Because
I
this is
see
one of
like
the things that get tracked.
what about like if I want to check how much storage I have, right? Like so we can store data in decisions. I don't know the max amount. How would I get that? Would I also have to go through them as well to see what's in use, what's available?
Believe you would. At the very least, it'd be probably be best if you just ask them where you can access it, because if there is this location that I'm just not familiar with, then they would be able to easily just say, hey, if you want to find this easily, this is where you go. They should easily be able to direct you there. I'm just unfortunately not as familiar with what the difference is and what they have access to versus what you have access to normally when Decisions is hosting.
Got it. Okay, I'll reach out. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, we've got another question from Peyton. And that question is, I'll let you have the ability to speak if you want to add once I read the question. Are you aware of how to structure a bulk insert SQL query? I know you can set up a table integration that will automatically create a bulk insert, but would like to be able to write my own to customize it.
Yeah. So with setting up like a table integration for an external SQL entity, you do automatically get a bulk insert, but I would just like to be able to write my own, and I'm just unsure how that would work with the data structure and decisions.
Hmm. Do you have, why is this really struggling for me today? Um, are you trying to like, are you focused on some external thing, like an external entity that you want to use the bulk
Yes.
insert on? Okay.
It would be an external SQL table that we just have a connection to, but I'm sure it would be the exact same for like an internal one.
Yeah. Internal ones are a little, I mean, there are a lot of like bulk insert steps too that have some customization to them, but
Hmm. Yeah,
obviously if we want like full like capabilities.
Yeah, and the real reason I'm doing it is just because I've had an issue with, I'm looking into writing my own bulk insert is because I'm having an issue using transactions along with one of the automatically generated bulk inserts. It, for some reason, does not seem to like it, even though it works without the transaction.
Hmm.
So just trying to see if writing my own would fix that problem I'm having.
Right. Yeah. Um, So yeah, I guess I don't. I'm not as familiar with like the language itself, but I know it's usually pretty easy to just build your own. Like if you have some kind of like this is an example project I have where I have an external database connection in here. But you know, you have the ability to like build out your queries and you can test them and run them and everything before you officially like save them to be used as steps. So if as long as you have like any external database connected to a project. And even if this isn't necessarily in version 9, I don't know if you're in version 9 or not, but regardless, it's the same thing. It's just in the system settings. In version 9, I get to build it on the project. You should still be able to add like any queries that you would like to build here. And as long as you know like the language of the query, you can like run it, check and see if you're actually getting the results that you're expecting and all that stuff, and then you can save it, and then it'll actually generate a step that you could just place in your system to play around with it and test it.
Yeah, so I use these SQL queries pretty often. It's just, with a normal SQL query, you provide it one or two variables. You don't provide it a list of rows of data
Mm,
for like an insert into SQL.
right, got it. Yeah, I guess I don't quite know enough. I mean, I know there's like you have the ability to add all these things, and like the parameters that you add can be like lists of values and stuff if you need them to be. But I don't know enough. I guess maybe I don't quite know enough to know, like I'm not very great at SQL. I know like the basics of it to know like how I can really build that out.
Mhm.
Um, I can ask someone else and see if they know more because I'm sure there's someone else that knows more than me about like writing SQL queries and stuff like that.
Okay,
And maybe they'd have more insight. Let me send a quick message now, and if I don't hear back, then I can still follow up.
sounds good.
Okay. I sent a quick message. I might hear back in the next like couple minutes, but if you don't want to stick around or if I don't hear back soon, I can reach back out to you with more
Yeah,
information or at least a direction on where you can look if you're more interested.
sounds good.
Okay, great. If you're still in the call when I finish some things or if I hear back, I'll jump back and call you out.
All right, thank you.
Hmm. All right. Okay, my next question is from Satish. So let me read it out loud. How secure is the session ID based integration decisions? We're trying to expose the flow as a REST service and decisions. Can you talk more about the security? Yeah, so when you are exposing um, flows and things, grab the testing flow here. Um, so if you want to expose something and we go to view uh, for the different like options and things that we have for how we want to like output the data. Um, the obvious like most secure options are anything that's going to require some kind of login or like credentials and things like that. So if you want to like allow someone to do something and you want it to be as secure as possible, the more credential options that you have is the better. Um, so things like the login is going to require someone to be able to actually like have a decisions login to be able to reach in and access those things. Whereas you have other things that begin to get a little bit less secure depending on like what you have available. You've got like a named session where there's like a session ID that's required. But I believe named sessions are a little bit less secure in some ways because they're not requiring, that access to, um, they're not requiring the same like levels of access in the security in the same way. Um, if this will,
So Jeremy said, you're talking about the name session, right? So
Mhm.
we create a session ID and then invoke the endpoint and then pass the session ID details. The other option is the login, right? So where you pass the user ID and password. And like do you know how that works? Like, does it send you another session ID and then use that session ID to authenticate, or I'm just trying to understand how to productionalize this endpoint URLs. Something like sharing it with some production environment.
Yes, can you clarify one more time?
I was trying to expose this flow as a REST endpoint, one of the flows.
Mhm.
So the authentication methods that we have is session ID. Yeah, it's secure in a way, but it's not that secure, right? Like once the session ID is hacked, and it's very static, session IDs can be shared and easily prone to attacks. The other option you said is login with the login, right? If you set up that as login, then we create some kind of integration user and grant the project access to that integration user. Is that how it works? Or
Yeah, so it's like the main difference, or I guess like key here, is like the login is going to require like specific account information um to be able to access this, whereas like a named session is something where you have like a user account um connected to this, but the session, it creates the session ID, like I think like you were saying. It creates this session ID that is the main thing that is actually getting exposed and sent through, instead of the direct account. uh like it's not necessarily like I connected to account and decisions, and that account generates the session ID, and that is what's getting exposed through the connection, as opposed to the actual like account information in the system. So then when that system sends, when the call is trying to be made, it's referencing the session ID as opposed to like specifically referencing like that person's account and account data and account password and all that kind of stuff. So if that's like the idea or the concern there is like having some like account and having the account data being passed through, like specify user credentials is a good example where the actual like input and stuff requires an ID and a password to be included, right?
right.
So if you
This
don't
is
want
said
that to be
not
included in the
recommended.
call, you wouldn't want to use this. This
Yeah.
has all of that done on decision side, so then it's connecting using the ID itself
Mhm.
instead of that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So there are only two ways to create this kind of REST endpoints, right? Like one is the session ID based and one is the login based. Is there any other option available, like something like OAuth or uh,
Those are the main options, and the most popular ones are going to be the named session, or just simply like sometimes we'll see someone use like a guest option to allow a guest account to access this, so that a user doesn't necessarily have to log into decisions or connect with like an account specifically. Um, but yeah, those are the main options, is to use some kind of session, or to have someone like direct login.
okay.
The credentials and the login are slight variations of the login. These are slight variations of that session that requires the session ID.
Yeah, I think the credential is like directly passing the user ID and password in the I think in the header. That's why it's mentioned it's not recommended for production use. I think the login one
Mhm.
is I thought I saw somewhere where you just uh, like send your username and password and get a session ID. I don't know. Maybe I will check the guide again. So I just wanted to check like how generally users use it for production use. Like they use the named session or the login ID based authentication. So
Mhm.
all right, that's fine, Jeremy. Thank you. Like I had another question, but if you have someone else in the
Yep.
queue, we
I'll
can do
I'll jump to that question since we're already talking. So your other question was, does it have any queuing mechanism for API calls?
right.
And I don't believe there's any like direct queuing. The only like queue, like the queuing thing I guess that we have is if you're running things on like additional threads, you can have like our event viewer has a thread job view that if you have like a step or something in decisions that will run something on a thread, or can set up multiple threads to run, then you can check that and you can have that data get run. And then you can, check the queue and see like the order in which they're doing things. But otherwise, I don't think there's a direct way to, like specify order or check the order, I guess, of like your API calls. If you're trying to like see when they go or if the order matters, you'd have to build that into your logic of when those API calls are being made, or anything like that. It just kind of depends on the steps that are making those calls and like the order and like what you're building to do them, like what you're building to actually like reach out to them, I guess. Like, you could have something like a run flows for list step, for example, that allows you to run things on multiple threads. And so it'll, like, let's say inside this run flows for list, you have your API call. It's going to run all of those API calls. It's going to put them on threads. So there's queues for each of those items as they're running. So it's only running like so many at a time based on how many threads you have available here.
Okay.
So like if you're running your API calls through something else in decisions that creates threads and queues, then yes, there's going to be that's the queuing mechanism. But if you just have, like a bunch of API calls being made without like any other step like this that has queue or thread management like that, then I don't think that there's any direct things that you would do to manage those.
Okay. Okay, Jen. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next up, we've got a question from James about page design. So go ahead, James, and extrapolate on your question.
Hey, I know this is pretty basic stuff here, but at FSU we've done a lot of work, but haven't done a lot of dashboards yet. So we're just diving into that world. So basically, we want to utilize form tiles, and we want to, if you were to go into click on your inbox right now, and that form or that page that's brought up, we want to do something very similar to that with the across the top there, you've got your simple tiles box, I think that is, that connects to your form below that, or your report below. And I just want to be able to pass the same, say it's the same thing, except it's a form, not a report. And I know you can put input on, but how does behind the page, how does that pass that data in and out to the actual form instead of a report? Like on a report, you set up a filter, but how does it know on a form what your values should be coming out of that simple tiles, whatever one they clicked?
You're talking about, maybe a little confused.
Yeah, see, when you click on that, now click on the worn one. Changes your report. That's all I want to do. Is just something very similar to that. Except it's going to be a form tile, not a report tile.
Got it. Okay, so you just want when someone clicks on something or makes a change, it changes this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and I'm just
okay.
I probably just haven't had the time to look into it totally, to see how that's passed on a page into a form versus, I know how to do it on a report. I just am having difficulty connecting it up on a form.
I built something that utilized this at one point, and I don't know if I still have it. Maybe I don't. The really the main thing that you're using whenever you're doing it, and whether it comes from the form tiles or on like a form tile, simple tiles,
Right.
flow run part, whatever. The main thing that you're doing on any of these is you're going to be having filters in based on whatever that entity is, right? In that case, it's like the state, right?
Yeah.
And these filters are going to be getting values from other reports,
Right.
or something like that, because this allows you to have this name, be used as your selection bus for gathering that data.
Right.
And then on whichever method you're using, so you said you're using a form tile.
Yeah, could create a page real quick and
Yep.
slide a form tile onto it, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Just any old page, yeah. Just slide a form tile on one of the big areas.
Tile.
Okay, so you can create your little form tile there, and you can just create some little, yeah, anything. Yeah. And now I take it you put your input there, right?
Mhm.
That setup input data. I'm assuming that's what's fed into the form, so we can just put, input in or something there. Right. And then you create your, yeah, let's just say that, and that's gonna be input in. Right. So you create your input flow there. And okay, if input in is coming from another, like a simple tile or whatever, how do I access that to put it so that I can make sure my input data is whatever I want it to be from that other tile?
So you're saying you're coming from some other like file option?
Yeah,
'Cause-
because see right there, when I do that and I look at all the options, I never see what's coming out of that simple tile.
Right.
I don't know where to go to look for that. I guess that's the essence of what I'm asking is where do I go to look for that? How do I get it to identify what's coming out of that simple tile? Is there a step I have to look to grab it, or
But
I know there's a
sorry,
create
let me just
tile.
clarify. So your goal is
Let's say you had a simple tile up there on the top that
right.
output what you wanted to feed into the form at the end of the day. It
Okay.
outputs the filter, so to speak, that you want to use on your form. Let's say you got a data grid on your form that takes that information and filters the data grid based on that. Exactly what that other is doing based on a report, but this is a form with a data grid. How do I get that input into that form from that simple tile right there?
Got it. You would need like set and get page variable stuff
Okay.
if you're trying to get something, because you would need to be able to set a page variable to set like something up. The setting
Yeah.
and getting page variables is like getting your like data and your variables up here so that you can actually set them. So then you could set a page variable on the tile data, based on the tile data or the tile data action or whatever that is to set
Okay.
like whatever this is here. You need to
Yep.
set that with this. And then on your get page variable, you can get that like
You get that.
variable
Okay.
name.
All
And
right.
so that's kind of like it's the step equivalent of the like selection bus, get value from other reports or send data to other reports and things like that that you usually have with
Okay.
my mind's blanking, sorry, with like the report filters and things like that.
Mhm.
That's kind of like what it's being used there. So in that example for like the inbox, it's without double checking it, it's most likely something to that effect where
Yeah.
the button itself or the simple tile is setting a variable, and then the report has it wouldn't use get page variable. The report has that option though for like the filter to get that data so that
Mhm.
it can filter it out properly. So it's the
Okay.
same thing here, but you would then use another flow to get the page variable so that you can then take that and data and place it where you need to get.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at that then. Yeah. I thought it would be something that I was just, like I said, we just haven't done these yet, so I'm not,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
And
sure
then
I'm
here
missing
it
some basic
outputs,
stuff.
yeah, and it'll output page data of whatever this like type and data or whatever is, so that
Yeah.
you could send it into there
Okay.
for whatever you
I'll
need.
look into that.
Okay. All right. Alexander is here with another question. Is there a way to break a structure into pieces similar to breaking a string into list steps? Just to clarify, what do you mean by pieces? Like if I have a structure here like this, oh, that's a bad example. There's only one item there. Like this, I have three properties. Do you just mean like to separate those fields out or something else?
So I have a data structure that has several properties to it. And it's a list of, data structures. And I just want to break them out into smaller pieces. So I would use the break string into list, but I'm not returning, it's not a list of strings, right? The list of
Mhm.
data structures.
So you have something that's got don't be weird on the decisions. Right. So you got something like this that's just a whole list of entities, right? Of whatever your entity is. And
Yeah,
then theoretically this has 100 items in it. And what you're saying is you want to split this list up so that it's not 100 items, but it's like 4 groups of 25. Is that what you mean?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if I remember. Oh, list steps. Okay. Yes, we do here. Hmm. This doesn't seem. I don't see anything that jumps out to me as splitting a list. Obviously, you can get like items, and you can maybe you might have to build something that would do this, unless you have a different way of wherever your list is coming from of breaking that apart in like earlier. You might be able to build something that would do like with like a for each to grab each item and then evaluate the index of the item so that like every fourth item gets put to a different list and that will generate your 4 lists. That seems like a little complex. Trying to think if there's other steps that I'm forgetting about here. Um, Splitting lists, separating lists.
Listen.
Hmm.
Don't be like my wife. My wife went to
No.
some places and looking like
I
that.
think
She's just looking for me. What a
nothing
problem.
is jumping to
I
mind
told
at the
her, "You're
moment. I
so
feel like you
evil."
might be able to,
You don't need to think about. No.
you're, unless I think of something else, you can use like filters to filter the list based off of like the index number, and then you just filter the list a couple times. That's maybe one way you could do that. So then it'll just like filter the list, and it'll output one list that has all of your like all of your items from that, like from the data type. If I grab this, like I could do this a few times maybe and take in my like list of these items coming from wherever I have this list of
The for each
case
step for
entities.
chunking, the for each step for chunking almost gives me what I want, except it doesn't give me outputs with different lists, right? It just kind of stops.
Sorry, say that again.
The for each step for chunking almost gives me what I want because it grabs a certain amount in that list and then outputs it. But the only issue there is it doesn't have the output list size for each step for the chunking. It can't be dynamically set. It has to be just a hard number.
Right. Hmm. Size collection. Not quite dynamic. Field size, I can help you there. Yeah, it might not be easy enough to do just like one, not in like a few simple steps. It definitely gets to be more complex. Like I know you could, so like you could definitely take like a for each step outputs the item index of whatever you have. So if you know for sure like you need to split it up into 4 groups, you could just take the item index and then on your next path like evaluate the index to say basically if the index is a multiple of 0, 1, 2, 3, then that separates it into like each of your 4 groups. You could maybe do that with a truth table, or something. It definitely gets more complex. I can't think of an easy step that would do it dynamically, I guess. Other than your, like you mentioned for the chunking one, doesn't let you do dynamic. I don't know. I might have to play around with this a little bit more to see if there's a better way to do it. I mean, you could definitely build something like obviously the for each for chunking, you could build it manually, but then you would have to like have your steps outside of this, read the item index, and then based on whether it's whatever the item index is to try to like separate that into 4 different lists, and output those things. That it would get very complex, and you would probably want to put that in like a async and wait flow or something so it doesn't take too long. But at the moment, that's just yeah, that's the only thing I can think of at the moment. I don't
With
see an easy way to make
the
that.
run flows for lists, could that possibly, do you think I could use that in some way to do this?
Actually, Vitaly has something. I'll let him add something if you have something you want to bring up.
The easiest way would be to create a query that will have an input of an index and an input of number of rows that you want to get, and then just for a loop, index from 0 to 25 would be, And then after you run that, you just multiply. In for the loop, that's going to be index. The second iteration will be index 1. So you just multiply 25 by 1, and then you will get next 25 items from 25 till 50. And then you'll multiply 25 by 2 because it's going to be certain iteration. And you just save those, for example, in data pairs. So you can have like a index 1, and then it's going to be first 25 as an object. Index 2 is going to be second 25 from 25 till 50 as an object. So you can do like that. And it's not hard to create that query.
Yeah, so like you're saying, if you just go to a you can anytime you go to create a data structure, you can add queries. So if you can build the query there that he's referring to, you could do it that way. If you That's probably gonna be like exactly like he's saying, it's gonna be way easier than trying to build it in decisions if you get the query language right. To separate your thing into whatever groups of lists that you need. So I think otherwise it would get increasingly complex and maybe not very efficient to try to build that in decisions. So anything you can do outside of decisions might be better.
Okay.
It's for the UI because
Thanks, guys.
the UI.
All right. I know you have another question, Alex, but I want to get to Vitaly's question first. He asked another question. So we'll come back to you for your second question shortly. So your question is, I have an issue with an entity type to filter out archived entities. In database, they show as archived equals true, and on report for entity data source, they show archived equals false. Okay, interesting. So it's different in the database than it is in the report.
So the issue is that I have two different entity types, entity A and entity B. If I just report on entity A separately, it's fine. If I want to kind of merge that data, so for example, I want to show on the same report fields that are common. So entity name, created by, created on, and stuff like that. So I report on the entity data in the folder because they are in the same folder, entity A's and B's. So on that report, they show something that was archived, so some bad data. And if I just query entity A table, they show archived as true.
Okay. I think I'm still a little confused of where so your report is reporting on just everything in the folder.
Yeah, so kind of like almost like that folder view report that you have on top.
Yeah. Yeah, this one here.
So kind of like that, but my folders, they just have those entities A and B. They don't have some like rules or any other stuff. So I'm using entity data in folder to report, but they also show like bad data. I don't know why it considers as bad data. So I deleted some of those entities, and they do not show neither deleted or archived from this standpoint.
That sounds really odd. I'm not sure why it would do that. To me, this sounds like maybe it's some kind of bug or something. Because that sounds Sounds very odd to have done that. If you have like a small export of like this very specific example I could look at, I might take like a quick look at it and see if there's something else like odd happening there. Or if we wanted to just submit it to support immediately to just get checked on for a DT, then maybe it would be something like that. Because that sounds very odd. I don't know it might take me a minute to try to replicate this and try it, and they'd be able to do that. But that doesn't sound like
Yeah,
doesn't
I
quite make
guess
sense.
I'll get the support because I'm gonna need to share my screen
Yeah.
because I don't know if that bad data will be exported with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, something sounds off about that. I think it'd be best to discuss with them, and I think they'll be able to highlight if there's something that we need to fix or if there's some disconnect that happened in your particular use case there. Okay. Right. Well then, we have another question from Alexander. Uh, and that question will be, can you let an outside application ping decisions, run a flow, and get the output of the flow as the response? And that's a very simple yes. So this is actually a project that we directly use to do exactly that. One of our training projects, the insurance claim process, will use we use Postman to do the call to basically reach out and say, hey, decisions, run this insurance claim process flow and then output the data. So all you need is input to get whatever you want to input from wherever that service is that's pinging decisions if you need it to start with some data. And if it's something more simple, like it doesn't need inputs or it starts with fetches or something like in the beginning, then you don't need the input here. But in our example, we have insurance claim because Postman is expecting to pass in a bunch of insurance claim data that like provides all the information about someone's insurance claim, their name, date of birth, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then at the end, oops, you need some kind of data to go to the end step. So in our case, in this particular case, that data is the status of whether it is a valid or invalid insurance claim, the code for the actual like request code that gets generated in this process, and then any list of issues that would mark this as an invalid claim if it is invalid. And if there's no invalid claim, then it would just be blank here. And so, but these are all things set as outputs on my red end step. So like I have them clicked here in this way, but basically as long as they're outputs set on the end step, and then you can publish this as an API service, hit the drop down and choose to publish it as an API service. And when you hit view to open up the integration details, this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the previous question from Satish earlier today. But essentially what this will do is it'll generate the like the information that you would expect or maybe need to input if you need inputs and things like that, and what your other outside program is trying to look for to send the data. And then you can gather that. Let's do it this way. And so here's like the parameters and here's the expected insurance claim input, like the user ID and password because I chose specified credentials, but everything else under here, there's some dummy example, but claim amount, date of birth, patient name, all these things that are data that I would pass in from Postman or from my other system. And then the outputs, it generates a little JSON based on the output that I have built on the red end step. So since the red end step has these three expected outputs, then the integration details will generate a JSON with those expected outputs as well, with claim status, request code, and a list of validation issues. So as long as you have the input and the outputs set up as you want for whatever needs to come in and whatever data that you want to output as the response, then when you click on, you set this to publish as an API service and you click view, you can get all the details in there. You can even test it. So it'll throw you a here and I can run the parameters with this specific data here and I can hit run, and it'll actually send me the actual results so I can see an example of what the results would look like. And so it read all of this data and said, hey, this is an invalid claim. Here's the request code, and here's the validation issue. There's an invalid insurance provider because I didn't change anything up here, right? But it does actually directly output the data as I need in a JSON. And yeah, there's other settings and things you can change if you need to, if you want to change some stuff. But for the most part, I think that covers it. It's very easy to do and to get that set up. The biggest thing is just making sure that you have the inputs set up as you need, the outputs you set up as you need, and then from there you can just get the URL or whatever set up exactly how you want to send it through, and then test it with your system to see if it connects and does give you the outputs you're expecting. And then, you may want to set it up with other things. Like I did user credentials because it wasn't loading, but like if I had a named session, you could use a named session there. You set up a named session and there will be a session ID that's required. And then as long as you provide the session ID with whatever system it runs, you can still get the output and it'll run it through decisions, call decisions, and whatever that red end step is outputting, it'll output the JSON with that exact red end step to wherever your thing is expecting the response.
Nice, thank you.
Mhm. Right. Just a quick aside. That's all the questions we have. We're just about done here. As a quick jump back to this, just real quick for you, Peyton. If you're looking for any like specifics on trying to do this, it's really just, I guess, understanding the SQL kind of system, and it sounds like you have at least a pretty good grasp of how to do most of this stuff. Adding multiple parameters and everything when this generates your step for you, so you should be able to pass the data in. It sounds like what you're asking or what you're looking for, you should have no problem with doing with the query integration. If you're looking for more specifics, because I did ask, and I think it's hard to basically the response I'm getting is it's hard to judge exactly the best way to help you without knowing like very deep specifics or maybe like sitting down with you and walking through the specifics of it. So I think with that, if you're trying to like really narrow it down or get some of those like elements, maybe get the parameters worked out better or whatever you need to like get your bulk query customized the way you want it, I think you're probably best to reach out to support because then they can actually like sit down with you, look at what you're actually looking at and what you're trying to build and help you get it to work in the way that you're looking for. And they'll also be able to take like your specific example of, they'll be able to take your specific example and try building it on their own as well and get a little bit more out of it than I think here. So I think, yeah, because you sound like you're fairly well versed, or at least you have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for and what you've already done with it. So I think they should be able to help you optimize it a little bit better to get more directly where you're looking for. And they can do that while looking at your stuff. So I think that might be your best option there.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, I know that was a long one today. Thank you all for all the questions. A lot going on, but we can go ahead and call it here. If y'all have any other questions, please feel free to ask away, join us again. We'll continue the rest of this week. We've got Jared tomorrow and myself on Thursday. So if you have any more questions, please join. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you all next time.